I don't know where this will all lead. The one thing I do know is, this is just the beginning.
I just finished binging the Netflix Avatar series, so let's quickly talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the show. Since I like to start out on a positive note, let's talk about what I thought were the best aspects of the show. So first up, what immediately needs to be recognized is the overall production of the set designs and costumes. You can tell right away that Netflix put a lot of money into this, as every single outfit here is clearly created by very talented people. This is a good looking show, and the CGI is good enough when it needs to be, though I really wish some of that background fire CGI could be a bit better. I also thought that the show moved at a very quick pace over the 8-episode season, as there weren't really any slower episodes or huge lulls. The show also does a decent job at adding some new material to what it's already adapting, with one particular standout Avatar Kyoshi scene and some more time spent with past avatars, which I really appreciated. On top of that, some of the fight scenes were done very well, with some very well choreographed bending sequences, with the best action scenes always involving Zuko and Aang. There's a particular fight scene in a market that is really great. It also spends a lot more time focusing on the brutality of the Fire Nation, as we get to see how the battle at the Air Temple played out with Aang being lost to the storm. The brutality of firebending as a whole was a really interesting angle to hit here, as it sets a tone for the show, though that one's more of a double-edged sword that we'll talk about later. And even though the acting is actually getting a lot of hate right now, I thought that the main actors for Zuko and Aang actually did a pretty good job, all things considered. They are definitely the standouts in the show, as they mostly embody these characters very well with the material that they are given. On top of that, getting the Zuko and Iroh dynamic was paramount, since that really is the heart and soul of this show. Also, special shout out to Daniel Day Kim as Fire Lord Ozai and Maria Zhang as Suki for putting in the work with their limited role. But unfortunately, not all the acting is as good as those that I just mentioned, as there are far too many scenes that can actually be very laughably bad at times. And not just from some of the background actors, but from some of the main characters in this as well. The writing plays a big role in that though, and it's never more evident than in the characterization of both Sokka and Katara. Honestly, they really deserve better than what they got here with their writing, as Sokka feels more like Schmidt from New Girl, which isn't inherently bad in that show, but it certainly isn't Sokka. And the way they characterize Katara in this feels like all of her fieriness and tenacity was stripped away from her, as they made her frustratingly docile in this, which is the opposite of who she is. The OG Katara would be ashamed of this interpretation. At times it feels as though the producers don't truly understand not only these characters, but also the various cultures that the show is actually pulling from. But one of my biggest complaints has to be the more mature tone that they are going with here. And honestly, going into this, I thought that maybe the darker tone had a chance to add more nuance or different angles to the source material, but instead the show loses the childlike wonder that made it special, and with that, a big part of who these characters are: kids. And even though they are attempting to placate to a more mature audience with said tone, they are constantly having exposition dumps thrown at us scene after scene, as it really does feel like they treat the audience like they are idiots. Like, not even the animated show that this is based off of had this level of exposition. So in the future, I hope that they can take a page out of the OG show and show more than they are telling. And they could also try to adhere to the cultures and the lore that they are adapting from in the future a little bit better, but that's a whole separate video for another time. Taking all of this into account, I'm going to give Avatar the Last Airbender on Netflix, the first season, a 6 out of 10. Anyways, I still think that the show is worth watching, as it's at least entertaining, though not always for the right reason. I am, however, interested to see just how much that they learned from this first season in future seasons, but just don't go into this expecting it to be anything close to as good as the master animated show that it's based off of, because I think it's very clear that no live action adaptation will ever be able to touch that source material. But I'm curious to know if you've watched Avatar the Last Airbender and what you thought of it. Let's discuss it in the comments below, and what were your favorite and least favorite parts of it. But it's not all about the story in this game, it also shines through in a number of other ways, with one of them being the gameplay. The symbiote suit is the perfect way to change up gameplay here, as you feel so powerful and it's actually kind of brutal to an extent. The variety of abilities that the suit comes with and how it changes up gameplay was everything I could have dreamed of when I was watching the Spider-Man cartoon in the 90s.